You know that feeling when you spend hours and hours organizing a space only for it to descend back into chaos in a matter of days? Or maybe you bought all the fancy bins, containers, and labels, but somehow your home still feels messy. We've all been there, so today I want to break down 7 common organization mistakes that you're probably making, and don't worry, I've made them too, but I want to show you some small tweaks that you can make to what you're already doing to create organization that sticks. So diving right into this, one of the most common mistakes that I see people making is overcomplicating their organization systems. Over the years of organizing my home, tackling various spaces, I began to notice that some spaces I would really only have to organize once. The organization systems would work, it really wouldn't be a lot of effort to maintain, and then other spaces, it would feel like it was something I constantly had to stay on top of. I would organize that area, maybe it was a closet or cabinet, but then inevitably a couple days later, a couple of weeks later, it would be messy again. I realized that it was a pattern that was really repeating itself, and so I one day just really tried to sit down and think through, okay, what is it about some of these spaces that are really effortless to organize and they always seem to be tidy? What is it about them that's different than these spaces that are just always descending into chaos? What I realized is that those spaces that seemed easy to keep organized, they were intuitive, they worked with my life, my lifestyle, whereas in those constantly messy spaces, I always had to think about, okay, where is it that this thing belongs? And if I didn't have time to think through it, I just throw it down, which inevitably resulted in messes occurring. So what I've been working towards now and really been finding makes a tremendous difference is making your organization so intuitive that you don't need to think about what the right spot is for something. Which of course means that when you're organizing, you really need to think through your habits, your patterns, how you use your house, not how you'd like to use your house, but how you actually use your house, and use that as a guide in organizing. Okay, then let's talk about decanting. I think that decanting everything is a mistake, but decanting nothing can be as well. Hear me on this, decanting can be helpful to a point. For example, in the pantry, it is so much easier and less messy to put your flour, your icing sugar into a container rather than keeping it in the paper bag that it comes in, where if you so much as breathe wrong, it gets everywhere. I think most of us agree that it can be helpful, but past a certain point, it really becomes more of a pain and a chore than a help. These days, social media is full of people who, in my opinion, have taken the whole restocking and decanting thing a bit too far. You'll see people decanting blueberries, strawberries, yogurt, milk even, going far beyond the pantry staples, and at a certain point kind of veering off from decanting for the purpose of making things easier to find, to use, and instead making it all about the aesthetic and just having things look nice. I think it's time that we put organization back in its rightful place. Organization, decanting, it's meant to serve us, not the other way around. And so as you're deciding on what you want to decant, I'd really encourage you to be thoughtful about, okay, what's going to be helpful to me? What's going to make my life easier, and not how is it going to look? And here's the thing, there's no one right answer to this. Some people find it helpful to decant more of their pantry staples and other bits that they're using all the time, and others don't find much of it at all worth the effort. Neither way is fine, but I really want to encourage you to focus less on what you're seeing on social media and more on what's practical, what's useful for you. Personally, I find it really helpful to have all of my cereal, my nuts and seeds in the same size containers where I don't need to worry about bags becoming unsealed, things going bad. That's something I dealt with a lot in the past. I didn't enjoy it, and so I started decanting them. I really like that, especially since they're things that I'm not having to go out and buy every single week. But that might not be true for you. Again, there's space for personal preference here. Again, it's just about finding what works well for you. And then let's talk about another organization mistake that I see all the time, that's hiding things from view. I think that you have to be really careful with your hidden storage, the bins, the containers, the baskets that are opaque, you can't see through them. They may be more pretty or tidy to the eye, but they can be real clutter collectors. You know, you'll see the basket but then forget about what's inside of it, which means that the things in it never really get touched, and it really becomes easy for those to become filled with junk as well. I had this happen a couple of years back in our pantry. I had these water hyacinth bins that looked really pretty, but they were above my eye level in our pantry, which means that I never really knew what was in them. Food would often expire or go bad in them because I just didn't see them, and the whole system just ended up being quite impractical. And so of course, in redesigning, reorganizing our pantry last year, that was really something that I made an effort to address. But a couple general things that you can do to prevent this problem. Number one, use labels. I feel like that's something that can only help, although I will say I do find that more helpful when you're dealing with non-perishables that you're not reaching for all the time. I think it's harder with things like food items, hygiene bits that you're reaching for all the time. When you can't see the organization, it makes it a lot harder to maintain. Which is why I'm also a big fan of clear containers, glass, plastic, acrylic. While not necessarily as visually tidy, it makes it so much easier to see what you have, and in my experience, what you see ends up getting used. I'd say especially things like pantry staples, hygiene bits, any kind of medical supplies. I find it really helpful to use clear storage for those things. But in general, I just say be really careful when hiding things from view. Of course, at least use a label, but even be conscious of that. You don't want your stuff just getting forgotten about. The goal of organizing should be to make things easier to find, not harder. Ooh, this is a big one. Not taking full advantage of your space, especially if you're in a smaller home or apartment. Take advantage of your square footage. It can be really easy to rely on the obvious storage spaces, the closets, the cabinets, while not even considering some of the hidden options that may be available to you. The space under your bed, hidden storage in an ottoman or couch, the backs of doors or cabinets. A lot of older homes and apartments, and even some modern ones too, don't come with a lot of built-in storage, and so sometimes you need to make your own. When we were in our apartment, we had a sofa where the chaise section opened up and we were able to store all of our games or puzzles in there. I love that so much that when we moved into this house, got our new couch, I picked one with a very similar design. So helpful having a place to store those things. There's so many great options these days for sneaky organization solutions like that, and so if you are in a smaller space, I'd say take full advantage of them, leverage those hidden spaces. Then this next one might be a bit controversial, but hear me out. I think that it's a mistake to declutter before organizing. If you just heard that and thought, wait, what? Aren't we supposed to declutter first? I hear you. I'm all for paring down, removing excess, getting rid of the things that you don't love, that aren't serving you. But what I find the problem is if you do that and then immediately go and organize, you leave yourself with no space for seasonal fluctuations, for trying new things. Our lives, our homes aren't static. There are periods of ebbing and flowing. For example, your pantry might have a few more things that might look a little bit fuller around the holidays than it would in January or February. The same thing in your closet. You might have the same number of summer and winter clothing items, but the winter items just take up more space. So I find that it can be a bit of a trap if we first declutter and minimize our possessions to the lowest possible amount before organizing, because we aren't organizing in a way then that creates space for those ebbs and flows that just naturally take place in our homes. And so a couple alternative approaches that I find helpful are, first, you can try organizing and then decluttering. That way you have built-in space for allowing for fluctuations while still removing any excess. Or what I'll often do is still declutter first, or even declutter as I'm organizing, but as I'm putting things back in, I'm making space, I'm allowing for fluctuation, and just kind of giving myself margin in the way that I organize. I think that that's really important, because if you organize everything, give everything a home, but then don't allow for additional possible homes, the moment you bring something new in, all of a sudden it doesn't have a home, and then it ends up on the floor, in the cabinet, just shoved in there, and that's really when the mess begins. Now, the one caveat I will add with this is more for the maintenance type decluttering, not when you need to do a massive purge, a huge declutter. Sometimes we do just have so much excess built up that we do need to kind of normalize things first. That's different. This is more talking about maintenance type decluttering and organization. Okay, then two left here. Another big one is organizing horizontally rather than vertically. And from both a space-saving and practical use standpoint, I am fully on board team organizing things vertically. There are a couple of reasons. It takes up less square footage. It's easier to see what you have. One of the big reasons why a few years ago the KonMari method of folding became so popular, because it makes such a difference to be able to look in your drawers and to be able to see everything that you have without having to rummage through all of the clothes, which inevitably end up in just a jumbled mess, right? There are so many, I'd say often untapped opportunities for vertical storage, whether that's in your pantry, a gift wrap organizer behind your door. One way I did this in the past year was using some drawers to better organize all of my medical supplies. Before, I just had them all stored horizontally in a couple of bins, but by putting each of the different categories in a separate drawer, labeling them, I was able to better maximize the space that I had, see each category individually, and overall just create a much more user-friendly, intuitive experience. Of course, that's just one example, but think about what that might look like for you and how you might be able to use some of that vertical space. Okay, the last mistake that I want to touch on today, and you guys, this is such a big one, that's when people set it and forget it. And in theory, doesn't it sound amazing just to have organization that's so good that you can do it once, never have to worry or to think about it again? I feel like sometimes we can get this idea in our heads that if we really get our organization right, we'll only need to organize a space once and then never have to worry about or to touch it again. I mean, we organized it, right? We should be good to go for life. As nice as that sounds, that's just not how organization works in practice. And even the best organized, the most intuitive spaces do require some maintenance. Now, well-organized space shouldn't need a complete overhaul every couple of months, but it's totally normal for a small reset to be really helpful. And so what I like to do is something that I call organization touch-ups. And every couple of months, I'll just go in and spend an hour or so just going around the different areas of my home, touching up the organization. And some of the spaces that are organized, they have the bones, the structure in place that just need a little bit of love. So whether it's once a quarter, once a month, or just on the go as you notice things get messy, spending some time maintaining, touching up your organization can go a long ways towards prolonging the life of the systems that you've put in place. Well, there we go. Those are the organization mistakes that I see people making all the time, that I've made myself, and some practical things that you can do to prevent them going forward. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Are you guilty of any of these mistakes? What do you hope to do about them? Or are there any mistakes that you thought of as I was going through this list that you want to share with us? I'd love to hear what some of those are. Let's learn from each other, right? That's everything that I have for you in this one, friends. So until next time, thank you so much for watching, for being here, and I will see you all again very soon. Bye.